Welcome to the Oklahoman's Video Studio. I'm Dave Morris. It is Wednesday afternoon. That means it's our time to catch up with Chris Castile. He joins us via the Washington Examiner's newsroom. Actually, our little studio at the Washington Examiner's newsroom. Chris Castile joins us from Washington via Skype. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Dave. How about yourself?
Doing well. It is swelteringly hot here. How's it there?
It's nice. It's actually fairly pleasant. I'm sorry what you're going through there.
I think we're just getting started with the warm weather here.
Sure.
Sunday, the horrible headlines hit us hard and fast. 49 people died at a nightclub shooting in Orlando. Omar Mateen, the accused in that, also dead. This incident has led to a discussion nationwide, perhaps a global discussion on gun control. Chris, from your perspective, from your location in Washington, D.C., you're seeing these debates firsthand from the politicals there. What is the discussion right now?
Well, Dave, it's a familiar one. It's happened after several of the just horrific incidents in the United States over the last few years. It happened after Newtown and California, San Bernardino last year, of course, and it's about these AR-15 and similar semi-automatic weapons mainly. That's it, and also about whether anybody who's on any kind of terror watch list by the FBI should be able to obtain any kind of firearm, really, but especially these military type weapons. And it was almost we were almost in the exact same situation here in December, after San Bernardino, in this debate where Democrats had an amendment that would have prohibited anybody on the FBI no-fly list from purchasing a weapon, and it failed pretty substantially. There were a lot of Democrats that were against it too. And gun control as an issue has not proven to be really a winning issue for Democrats. I mean, it's automatically their go-to issue after something like this, and I'm not saying there shouldn't be discussion of it, because I think that question is on a lot of Americans' minds. How does this guy who was on the FBI no-fly list, I think for a couple of years, over a year, and it was at least investigated by the FBI. How is it that he's able to? Well, because there was nothing stopping him. There was no, he didn't have any kind of felony or mental illness commitment. He wasn't committed. There was nothing legally to stop him from.
It looked like he bought the guns legally as well.
Which is what I was trying to say. That there was nothing to stop him from buying these guns legally. That's why he was able to purchase them. So you have the debate about, again, how is it that people can, why is it that people, U.S. citizens, can even own these kinds of weapons that are capable, they're not automatic weapons, they're semi-automatic weapons, but they're obviously can fire more rounds than a revolver or something. So there's that debate about that kind of gun, and then there's a debate about who should be able to purchase them. And I think people remember the Democrats were in charge of both houses in the 2 years before President Obama took office, and in his first 2 years in office, 2009, 2010. So you had a period there where the Democrats could have pushed some kind of gun legislation. I think by then, pretty sure by then, the what they called the assault weapons ban, whatever assault weapon might mean, the one that was passed in 1994, that had expired. So there wasn't a ban in place. They could have tried to renew that and didn't. They made no effort in those 4 years, 2 of which they had a Democratic president who would have signed it. They made no effort to pass gun control legislation in those 2 years, and it's because it is not. Maybe now it would be easier because there aren't any really very many blue dog Democrats left, what we call blue dog Democrats, conservative Democrats that Oklahoma used to have, that a lot of southern states used to have before gun control and other issues wiped them out. And that was a big issue in 1994. A lot of people probably don't remember, but in 1994, which was President Clinton's first term, his midterm. Um, First, they passed the Brady bill, which is still in existence today, the waiting period to buy a handgun. And then they passed a crime bill late in that year, 94, which was an election year. Um, that crime bill included Senator Dianne Feinstein's semi-automatic weapons ban. And Democrats, Southern Democrats in that year got wiped out. And that includes ones in Oklahoma. That included the Speaker of the House back then, a gentleman, Tom Foley from the state of Washington, who represented kind of lots of rural Washington. Anyway, that a lot of people consider those pieces of gun legislation in 1994 as contributing to that Democratic wipeout and in the ensuing years the distrust of the Democratic Party when it comes to guns. I mean, you've got we've done all these stories, national stories have been done about, when President Obama first took office, all kinds of people ran out and bought guns. When, every time one of these incidents happens, the, excuse me, the sales of firearms goes up. People don't trust Democrats on guns, and they realize these people vote. So that is a very long answer to your question. That's the politics of gun control. Now, the Democrats right now in the Senate right now as we speak, I believe they are still filibustering a bill trying to force a vote on gun control. But they know it's not going to happen.
Well, I was going to ask you, Chris, so always the key question to ask in events like this is, what happens next? Gun control legislation, would it be constitutional? Is there any chance of it moving on?
No, that's a good question. The answer to the question of whether it's going to happen this year is obviously not. You have, Republicans are in charge of both the House and the Senate. They're not going to let it get on the floor unless there's just some kind of parliamentary maneuver that they can't block. But there's not really a clear answer on whether it's constitutional. There was a very interesting non-action by the U.S. Supreme Court in December. There was a case out of a town in Illinois. I think it was Morton Grove, Illinois, is the name of the town, that has a ban on possession, sale, manufacture, et cetera, of semi-automatic weapons. And this law was challenged. And it got all the way to the Supreme Court. It was upheld at the lower court level. And the Supreme Court declined to hear it. They declined to review the lower courts. They didn't want to look at this case. They didn't want to get into whether this semi-automatic. So there is a legal semi-automatic weapon ban in a town in Illinois because the Supreme Court didn't want to hear it. So we don't know whether it's constitutional or not. In the last several years, I think it was 2008 and 2010, there were big Supreme Court decisions on the right to bear arms. Yes, in every state and the District of Columbia, an individual has a right to own a firearm. Restrictions, though, they said that we are not saying there can't be restrictions, and they have not defined those restrictions. They made it clear in their opinion, one of the second of those opinions, look, we're not saying that you can't have restrictions on firearm possession near a school zone or in a church or something like that. So they have left open still some questions about, there's got to be a line, right? I mean, sooner or later, the Supreme Court's going to have to say, well, this weapon you can have and this one you can't. And they just haven't really done that yet. I mean, that's coming probably. They will eventually, have to get involved in some of these issues about a particular type. They would never say you could own a bazooka, I don't think. Or a rocket, propelled grenade gun, or something like that. I mean, there has to be some line that the Supreme Court's going to have to draw on this.
The story that Chris is mentioning was a story that he actually covered back in December on that Illinois case, as well as the ones before that. In fact, the Supreme Court last year declined to review two such cases.
San Francisco case, right?
That's right, the San Francisco case.
Ordinance about handgun. You had to have your handguns, I believe it was, you had to have them locked up.
The late night talk show hosts, one congressional member, and of course everybody's taking a platform and a stance these days, taking the opportunity, if you will, are saying that the 10 seconds of silence is not enough. Something needs to happen. But as you indicated, perhaps this year nothing will happen on that, and I guess we'll see what happens beyond this year.
To get back to, and briefly, the the argument about the next Supreme Court justice, there's only 8. There's a vacancy. It's obviously not going to be filled this year. Apparently not going to be filled this year. When it comes to further defining the right to bear arms, that justice is going to have a huge role in that, a huge influence in that.
Chatting via Skype with Chris Castile. He's in Washington, D.C. I'm Dave Morris here in the Oklahomans Video Studios. And every week, as I mentioned off the top of this segment, we chat with Chris about various political matters, whether it's national or local. And let's tie the two together now in Republicans' reluctancies on LGBT issues and Oklahoma Congressman Steve Russell.
Right. I think that because of this horrific tragedy in Orlando, which apparently the gunman targeted this LGBT club. I think some of the LGBT issues that have been kind of front and center for the past few weeks are not going to be for the next few weeks, because it's not really in Republicans' interest to have those fights right now. Sorry, Dave. One of the main ones that they were having, a recurring one, was over this Steve Russell. He's a congressman from the Oklahoma City area. This amendment that he put on the defense bill, that he said was religious liberty, trying to protect religious-based organizations that have contracts with the federal government from violating their religion, in order to have these contracts. And most of that has to do with employment law. So, can Catholics hire only Catholics? Yes, they can. That's actually allowable. There's been Supreme Court decisions that have said that. So what Steve Russell said he was trying to do was protect these groups, but there was no obvious threat to them. So it's kind of hard to figure out exactly where this Russell amendment came from, because there was no court challenge. There weren't these, it wasn't like the contraceptive mandate where there were court cases percolating all over the United States about whether you're violating religion. There was no case, but it became a real flashpoint in the House about LGBT rights. The Democrats said the Russell Amendment, and the Republicans were trying to discriminate, to basically legalize and put into law employment discrimination against LGBT people. It was becoming a floor fight almost every time they had a spending bill on the floor. That's going to go away, I think. I don't think the Republicans want to have that fight right now. And the other one was, the transgender bathroom issue. Senator James Lankford was going to have a hearing last week on this. He's been a big critic of Obama, the Obama administration, and this, the guidance that they've tried to give public schools about transgender bathrooms. And the hearing had to be canceled because of scheduling things. But I asked his office, "You guys in any hurry to reschedule this?" They go, well, we're looking at July. So again, I think that as a political issue is probably going to go away for them, for a while, definitely.
Chatting with Chris Castile. He's in Washington, D.C. Great perspective and analysis as always. You can follow his coverage in the Oklahoman and online at newsok.com and on Twitter at newsokpolitics for nuggets of gold and information throughout your day. Chris, let's get out of here on this. Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee, and the word presumptive is only probably used once every 4 years in anybody's vocabulary, but the presumptive. So this week, Donald Trump says...
journalistic words.
Right, exactly. I forget what the one we used last year when the Southern Republican Leadership Conference came through. Maybe it was gaggle or something. Anyway, Trump bans Washington Post. What's the media's thought out there?
They're beside themselves, and with good reason. It's absurd. We've had statements from the National Press Club president, the Standing Committee on Correspondence, I think the White House correspondent, all the journalism organizations have spoken out on this. Basically, what he's saying is that if you write a story, a headline on it that you don't particularly like, even if it's one of a pattern that you see, you don't ban reporters from these events. That it's just nobody does it. And it's, believe me, after all my years covering politics, I run into this all the time. I've had a congressman recently say to me, I'm a real believer in the First Amendment. And then something after that's coming. Yeah, right. Until I write a story that you don't like. But so he's already said apparently too. This isn't the Washington Post isn't the first one that's been banned, and I just don't it's just beyond words to me really that he would do this, and I think a lot of people, maybe especially in our part of the world, believe that the media is really biased, and I don't want to have that discussion about, in general about whether they are or not. But I would remind people of this. When the Clintons first took office in the early 90s, I was here. And the New York Times had, I believe, I could look back on this, three of their best investigative reporters assigned to write about the Whitewater land deal in Arkansas and the Clintons' involvement in that. And, I don't think anybody ever came up with anything on Whitewater. But that didn't stop, the press, the most prominent newspapers in the country from digging and digging and digging on everything about the Clintons. And the Clintons resent the press. The Clintons do not like the press. I can say that without attribution. I just think it's a verifiable fact. I think they felt like the press has persecuted them ever since they came into office. So whatever you might think about the press's biases, towards one party or the other's presidential candidate, I would advise you to look back and look at some of the coverage of the Clintons, and then we can have that discussion.
The executive editor of the Washington Post is Marty Barron. He wrote Monday afternoon and posted on Twitter, "The Post will continue to cover Donald Trump as it has all along, honorably, honestly, accurately, energetically, unflinchingly," and other adverbs. "We're proud of our coverage and we're going to keep at it." So that's Marty Barron's words.
Yes, right.
Chris Castile, his coverage of Washington, D.C. politics and Oklahoma politics can be found in the Oklahoman and online at newsok.com, and we chat with Chris live via Skype every Wednesday afternoon, and we appreciate it. Thanks, Chris.
All right, Dave. Glad to do it.
All right, catch you next week.
Thanks.